Good evening. Last night on The Breakdown, Rick Wilson addressed the abhorrent actions of Lincoln Project co-founder and former member John Weaver. LPTV and this show are part of the Lincoln Project family, as a show dedicated to lifting up the voices of those who too often don't have a voice. The We're Speaking team felt it was important to lend our voices to the condemnation of John Weaver's predatory conduct. There is no justification or excuse ever for using a position of power, privilege, and trust to manipulate another person into engaging in any degree of sexual interaction, even text messages with other adults. Those people who do this delude themselves into believing it's consensual. There can't be consent where one person's in a position of power over another, and that includes the promise of professional opportunities. As a survivor who experienced sexual harm resulting from a professional situation, my heart goes out to all those John Weaver harmed. Believing you have an opportunity before you, that you possess professional skills and experience that someone sees value in, to only then learn that you were seen as little more than a potential sexual opportunity is really painful, and it causes you to question how you're perceived by the world, and if you're even able to discern a predator from a true professional opportunity. As a mother and as a human being, that an adult would prey on a child, inflicting years of harm on that person, is unconscionable. Our hearts go out to all those men that this man harmed, especially the young man who was a child when it began. All of us at We're Speaking appreciate and applaud the transparency the Lincoln Project has displayed, their decision to sever their professional relationship with Mr. Weaver, and to encourage any person he's harmed to speak publicly or with the media if they so choose, while also respecting that it's every individual's right to decide if or when they share their story. We wish healing to all those harmed and accountability for the man who caused it. And to those who see damage that has been done to these young men as an opportunity, though I know you have no shame, shame on you nonetheless. Attempting to benefit from the trauma of others makes you no better than the predator. And finally, if you are someone who has experienced sexual harm and you need someone to talk to, the National Sexual Assault Hotline has compassionate, well-trained people who you can speak with confidentially. They can be reached at 1-800-656-4673. Reach out if you need help. You're not alone.
Welcome to We're Speaking, the Lincoln Project's newest show. I'm Maya May.
And I'm Lisa Senecal. Every Wednesday, we're speaking with you about the most pressing issues of our time, but with a twist. Our focus is the impact those issues have on women and on raising up the voices of women working to make real, lasting change and progress.
Tonight, we're speaking about the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women's employment, particularly the struggles facing low-wage workers, the ones we call essential, but don't treat that way.
Right. The people who, in the name of unity, Republicans in Congress believe we need to ignore as women lose their jobs and are forced from the labor market so they can stay home and take care of their children and be caregivers to older family members.
Or risk their health and safety going to work because Republicans spent a year convincing people to fight against wearing masks. So tonight, we're speaking with Reshma Saujani, CEO of Girls Who Code, and the leader of a group calling for a Marshall Plan for Moms, and Saru Jayaraman of One Fair Wage, a nonprofit fighting to get the federal minimum wage raised to $15 an hour.
We're also going to chat with two women working in the service industry who, like millions of Americans right now, and even before the pandemic, are really struggling to keep their financial heads above water. Now, tipped workers, restaurant servers, God, Maya, is there any other job where you can provide a service and then after the fact, the customer determines its value, which is really your value and how much they're going to pay you?
It's a system with an ugly past, and to be honest, a pretty ugly present. And we'll talk with Saru about all of that. But we also want to hear from all of you. Are you an essential worker? And what actions should be taken to support essential workers? So we'd love to hear your stories. You can give us a ring at 646-374-8339 and leave us your thoughts, or feel free to tweet us using hashtag We're Speaking, or leave a comment for us on Facebook.
Yeah, we're going to be speaking with Reshma in just a few minutes, but it's really staggering to me how much um, women have suffered during this pandemic and how little attention seems to be getting paid to it. I know that there are components of Biden's plan that are really supposed to be able to make a measurable change for women right now. I hope those pieces stay in place by the time the Republicans are done with it.
Yeah, because it's about out of control. I mean, I think mothers are 3 times more likely than fathers to have lost jobs during the pandemic, and this is something that's going to impact us not just in the short term, but also in the long term. You know, we're used to him being at school, and how many times, even for people who are staying at home and working, we have to say something like, mommy's in a meeting right now. It makes them feel ignored, and we're wrapped up in guilt, and they're really, companies aren't doing all that much about it. No one's really stepping up.
Right. And you're absolutely right about that 3-to-1 ratio and how much harm it's going to do to women. When women lose even a short period out of the workforce, that that gap in their employment ends up carrying through the rest of the years that they have to earn. And then it's still there when they retire in lost Social Security and other retirement wages.
Yeah.
So what women are facing now, it lasts a long, long time, which is one of the reasons we're so excited to have our first guest here with us tonight. Reshma Saujani is CEO of Girls Who Code, and now she's spearheading a new effort, which is really exciting, called the Marshall Plan for Moms. Reshma, welcome to We're Speaking. We're really happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So we need to start with, what is the Marshall Plan for Moms? What does it look like, and why is now the time?
As you mentioned, we're in a national crisis. In December, 100% of the jobs lost were women. We're at labor market participation rates at where we were at in the 1980s. It took us 9 months, just 9 months, to lose over 30 years of progress. So we need a 360 plan, a Marshall Plan for moms to get them back to work. I think that plan should include basic income for mothers. It should make sure that we pass policies like paid leave and affordable daycare. Third, it should include making sure that we open up schools safely, 5 days a week. And finally, we got to retrain so many women who've had to leave the workforce because their jobs have been automated or they weren't pandemic proof. The point is we have to do something now.
Yeah, as a mom, I love hearing that there's such a force of women coming together to put something together like this. But my question is how would you determine eligibility for this? Is it something you see? Is it direct payments? Is that how payments would be done, or tax credits?
Yeah, I think that this is a question for the Biden administration. It must be means tested. Look, I think a lot of us, I will say for myself, I'm privileged. I can work from home. I have some support. My husband, has, a flexible job. So, but there are so many women out there who don't have that, who've been forced to work the night shift, who've been forced to, go on food stamps or move in with their parents. Almost 70% of breadwinners in low income families are mothers and are disproportionately women of color, and they need help. And payments would go a long way to help them put food on the table or pay for childcare. So when we're thinking about the stimulus plan and we're thinking about what COVID recovery should look like, it should include a payment and support for mothers.
You mentioned that you consider yourself privileged, and I certainly do as well. And Maya, you and I have talked about this. We both feel that we have a lot of privilege, especially right now during the pandemic. But so often it's the people with the least amount of power and time and resources and the ones who are getting most harmed by the existing systems who are expected to be out there fighting for change because they're the ones who need it most. How do you motivate and activate people with privilege to get out there and make the systemic structural change that you describe that a lot of folks who are privileged, we benefit from the existing structures?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. Look, I think that there's a lot of populist mom rage right now, across the income spectrum, across, socioeconomic, across race, because we're just pissed. We have been asked to work for free. They say motherhood is a choice. We didn't choose this. My son's in public school, and every day I run an organization and I have to log them on Zoom at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock. I wait every night to see whether school's going to be open or it's going to be closed. I look at other women on my Zoom screen, who are part of my team, who are just trying to get girls to learn how to code, and we are exhausted. And in the beginning of the pandemic, we kind of grinned and bared it, right? But now we're at our breaking point. So when when I wrote this op-ed and then when I launched this ad campaign, I have been overwhelmed with the response. 10,000 women have signed this petition. There are women who are writing letters to their legislators from El Paso, Texas to, Topeka, Kansas. I've been, received phone calls from people in Congress saying, I want to pass a bill, I want to write a bill. Today, the press secretary was asked about it in the White House briefing. So we've tapped into something. And look, just like every other mother, I am exhausted. I am a nanny. I am tech support. I am a cook. I am a teacher, and for so many of us, we've had to supplement, our paid labor for unpaid labor. And again, nobody has asked us. I've been fighting for equality my whole life. My family came here as refugees. My mother has struggled with so many of the issues that so many women in our country, immigrant women in our country, are fighting for right now. And we have to fight for them. We have an opportunity in this pandemic to finish this fight, right? To rebuild this structure. We can't build America back better if we don't build motherhood back better.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And when you speak about mom rage, I definitely see it. As a mom myself, trying to balance all those things, that resonated very hard with me. And I'm in a Facebook group for moms during all of this. And rage is a perfect way to describe that. I think that's the new hashtag that we need to use, express your mom rage right now. So that it's uh, something that I'm actually super curious about. You mentioned girls who code and still trying to get the girls to code and how difficult it is and challenging during this time. Tech is generally, a lot of the products and the apps that are created seem to lean heavily towards solving men's problems because it's a lot of men in tech. Do you see opportunities for tech to, I don't know, like, is there an app for this? Is what I'm saying. Is there an app to fix this problem? Can you build it?
Look, before COVID happened, we had taught over 300,000 girls. We had girls who code clubs in, 10,000 clubs in every single county, town, parish that you can imagine. And then COVID happened and schools were shut. Technology companies that we taught in were closed. Half the girls we teach are under the poverty line. Half are Black and Latina. They didn't have high-speed internet or devices at home. And so, this pandemic has, especially for Black and Latina girls, affected them more deeply. And we've lost generations. But we at Girls Who Code are making sure that doesn't happen. And we've shifted our programs remotely, and we've taught more girls than we ever have. And so I have faith that our girls will heal us. They will save us. They will solve climate, COVID, and cancer if we give them the chance and if we fight for them. And that's why this issue is so important to me, because we have to remember our daughters are always watching us. And they are watching us right now and every single day, just exhausted and depleted. And they are watching us stand up for our country when our country at this moment is not standing up for us. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to replicate this pattern. Again, we have fought for these issues for too long. I'm going to say this over and over again. It is time to finish the fight. So if you're mad right now and you're a mom, take that rage, call your legislator, get out there on the street, demand for flexibility. This is our moment to finish it.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because I think, one of the things I hope we all learned coming out of the 2020 election was the power of individuals. When we do all come together to create real change, we know what we have the power to do. So thank you so much for inspiring us with the work that you're doing with Girls Who Code, uh, with your challenge for girls to be brave and not perfect, which I think resonates with a lot of us. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And we're going to keep a close eye on your initiative, and hope everybody's holding the Biden administration's feet to the fire.
Thank you, Lisa and Maya. Appreciate everything you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. So it's so sobering to hear, but it's so nice to hear about other people's rage as well, because sometimes I think I'm alone in the rage.
Yeah, it is. It's nice to, whenever you are in one of those situations where it feels like, my God, this is all just so hard. And is anybody else out there feeling it as intensely as I am? Women who, she's incredibly accomplished, and uh, she has a good support system around her. And it still, we're all in this very highly stressful, charged, difficult situation. And some of us are feeling it more than others, but we're all in it.
Yeah, we definitely are. And I'm grateful. I have my mom with me, so she's able to help out. But she also works from home. And neither of us are equipped or skilled to tutor in math or any of the number of things that my daughter's
Right.
doing in school. And so I think, that's really when she speaks about the fact that we're having to wear all of these hats. I think that's where the rage comes in, because women are always expected to be able to do these things without training, without pay, and it does feel frustrating. And at the same time, it's like, yes, the whole world is in chaos, but we need policies in place. And so I'm super happy to hear that it's getting the attention that it deserves and that they are looking into it. It was mentioned in a press conference. I didn't know that. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I unfortunately missed Jen Psaki today, so I have a reason to go back and look at my recordings and be able to watch that, because that'll be a great moment. She's been amazing.
I,
I am a big Jen Psaki fan.
Me too. I was like, I think everybody needs their daily dose of her at this point now,
Yeah,
because she's like the one that I see, and I'm like, yes, I
and
believe.
she's so damn normal. That's what always strikes me, is like, these are actual press briefings and people behave like normal human beings again. It's almost a little disorienting after 4 years of the wackos that were behind that podium. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
totally digressing, but man, a little normalcy after the Trump years is a welcome
yeah.
change.
Yes, I will take it. I will take it. Definitely will. Logic. It's what's for breakfast. Um, So we do definitely want to hear from any essential workers out there. We'd love to know what actions should be taken to support essential workers. We really do want to hear your stories. So once again, you can give us a ring at 646-374-8339 and leave us a message, your thoughts, and you can tweet at us at hashtag We're Speaking. And we've actually already heard from a lot of you. We heard from Michelle on Facebook. She wrote that I am a school food service worker in Kentucky, and I have not been out of work. We were too essential to quarantine. I speak for grocery store, gas station, and fast food workers who work for as little as $7.25 an hour. Surely we essential people are worth more. Yeah, you are.
Yeah, we like to call people essential. We're just not very good at actually treating them as though we mean it. So we also have a tweet from Eva on Twitter, and she wrote us, if grocery workers are essential, I want to put in a word for myself and my colleagues in North Carolina. The greatest support I could ask for is the $15 minimum wage. This is simple change that would improve our lives substantially. I currently earn $9.57 an hour. My In 1988, my first job out of high school, I earned $10 an hour. And that was hard to live on then. That we are now 33, 34 years beyond that. And she's earning what I earned. It is outrageous what we have done to people.
Yeah, it's unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable, and it provokes rage in me every time I read about it. I'm like, these aren't livable wages. Samantha on Facebook also left us a message. She said, "I currently teach in person in Texas, and I have 26 plus kids in my small cramped art room with little ventilation. We need teachers and all school staff vaccinated ASAP." Yes, please. Our teachers, definitely essential. And it just seems we can do so much better. We can do so much better.
We can. We're failing so many folks right now. I hope we're going to start seeing really dramatic changes now that we have some competency in the White House. But the risks that people are taking right now to educate our children, make sure we have food on the table, gas in our cars, all the things that we just take for granted. People should not have to risk their lives to be doing these things, and that's what we're asking of them right now. So now that we're good and pissed off, let's move on, yes, to the Oh for Fuck's Sake Award. This is an award that we are giving out every week to the most inane, loathsome, absurd, ridiculous people of the week. And God knows, our cup runneth over with these folks. So we're going to go ahead and reveal the 3 nominees for this week. Our first nominee is Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida, who pals around at events with members of the Proud Boys, is attacking a member of his own party for supporting free and fair elections, and is still desperately doing anything he can to get Donald Trump to learn his. Our next one is Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, she's swell. Marge is the de facto House Republican leader at this point and chief QAnon conspiracy theorist. In years past, Republicans would have run screaming for fear of being associated with a lunatic like Marge, but not anymore. Now they can't find the words, the integrity, or the guts to call her out for inciting violence, tormenting victims of school shootings and their families, harassing a Black member of Congress, her anti-Semitism, her 9/11 denialism. She is full on Lady Q. And Maya, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, this one's delightful. We can't forget Rudy Giuliani. You might know him from 4 seasons, Total Landscaping, who we previously thought he'd lost his mind after holding a press conference in front of a landscaping business and sex shop and participating in an interview that included lying on a hotel mattress with his hands down his pants. But he sealed it by accusing the Lincoln Project of being behind the January 6th storming of the Capitol. Yes, this is the same Rudy Giuliani who attended the insurrection incitement rally and encouraged the mob to determine the election outcome through trial by combat. You could still vote. I think we have at least about 20,000 people or so who have already chimed in. The poll is live on our Twitter at LPTV, and we will announce the winner of the losers at the end of the show.
Looks like Marge is the runaway favorite right now, but folks, you've got time. So if either Rick, Matt, Rudy are your most loath, please do get your votes in there, and we're going to reveal the winner of the losers at the end of the show.
Yep, make your voice heard. And
voting's important.
It is, but especially now, because this is a fun award. So we laugh so we don't cry. And essential workers, we still do want to hear from you. We have Cheryl on Facebook. Let's see here. She says, we need a hazard pay stipend for the extreme risks involved in being essential workers. I'm an RN and feel all essential workers are dealing with unimaginable stress and worry about exposure to self and from those people refusing to wear masks and other protective measures. So, yeah. We are living in a world where people don't want to do the bare minimum. Like, it's the bare minimum.
It's so little to ask, and so monumentally selfish that people can't find it within themselves to forget about their own health. You can do what you want with your own health, but to be unwilling to protect the people around you, especially the people like we're talking about tonight, the essential workers who have no choice but to be there doing their jobs. And we got to take better care of each other, folks.
Yeah, we do. It's crazy. And that's this, you know, what's really crazy? This is the thing that gets me. Absurd, even. $2.13 an hour. Did you know that? Did you know that millions of tipped workers and other service workers are paid a sub minimum wage, which under federal law is just $2.13 an hour? Yeah, you heard that right. $2.13, not even $2.15. Can't even throw in that extra 0.02 there. Like, it's crazy. It's not livable. It wasn't livable in the before times, and it's certainly not now with forced restaurant shutdowns and lower patronage and hazardous work conditions. They're among some of the hardest hit by the economic crisis, which is why I'm really excited that we have Saru Jayaraman here today. She's the president of One Fair Wage, an organization dedicated to ending sub-minimum wages in the United States. Welcome, Saru. Welcome to We're Speaking.
For having me.
So glad that you are here. Can you start with explaining what the sub-minimum wage is and the origin of it?
Absolutely. So first, it's important to note that the restaurant industry right now is one of the largest and fastest growing private sector employers in the United States of America. Prior to the pandemic, there were 13.6 million restaurant workers. That's almost 1 in 10 Americans that worked in restaurants prior to the pandemic. Unfortunately, despite the industry's size and growth, it was always the absolute lowest paying employer in the United States, largely due to the money, power, and influence of the trade lobby, the National Restaurant Association, which represents the chains, the IHOPs, the Applebee's, the Olive Gardens. And this trade lobby has been around, it turns out, since emancipation, in some form, since emancipation of slavery. When they first demanded the right to hire newly freed slaves, not pay them anything at all, and have them live entirely on this new idea that had just come from Europe at the time called tipping. Tipping originated in feudal Europe as an extra or bonus on top of a wage. But when it came to the States, because restaurant owners wanted to be able to hire Black workers and not pay them anything, they mutated the idea of tipping from being an extra or bonus on top of the wage to becoming the wage itself. And that idea that people, Black people in particular, and women could live off of nothing but tips became law in 1938 as part of the New Deal, when everybody got the right to the federal minimum wage for the first time, except for millions of Black workers, including tipped workers, who were told you get a $0 wage as long as tips bring you to the full minimum wage. And we went from zero in 1938 to $2.13 an hour today, a $2 increase over 81 years for a population that is now the largest and fastest growing workforce in America, one of the largest workforces of women, one of the largest employers of women, gets to pay these women, who are largely, by the way, women working in IHOPs and Denny's and Applebee's. They're mostly working in casual restaurants, struggling with the highest rates of economic instability, poverty, use of food stamps, and sexual harassment of any industry in the US, because they have to tolerate all kinds of inappropriate customer behavior to feed their families in tips. That was all before the pandemic. With the pandemic, yeah,
Right.
with the,
Yeah.
with the pandemic, this issue has gone from being an issue of total injustice, racial injustice, gender injustice, economic injustice, to literally becoming a matter of life and death. Because with the pandemic, about 6 million of these workers lost their jobs, and about 60% could not access unemployment insurance because in most states they were told that their wages were too low to qualify for benefits. And then they were forced to go back to work without feeling safe. 90% of workers said tips were down 50 to 75%. The CDC named restaurants as the most dangerous place to work. And on top of it all, workers said that they were penalized, that when they tried to enforce social distancing and mask rules, customers tipped them less, which meant the majority of workers said, I just cannot enforce these rules. But worst of all, 40% of workers said sexual harassment went way up during the pandemic. And millions of women told us that they were being asked to remove their masks so that men could judge their looks and therefore their tips on that basis, which is outrageous.
Yeah.
Wouldn't happen if
Yeah.
these women were actually paid a minimum wage, just the minimum wage, so that they don't
Mhm.
have to put up with as much from customers. They could count on a wage from their boss, like every other worker in every other industry. But it also means these are the only essential workers now who are not paid the minimum wage and who are being asked to remove their protective gear for a chance to earn their income, which is why I'm saying $2, you're right, was never enough. It was always
Right.
outrageous, but now it's
Mhm.
literally life threatening.
Yeah.
Most certainly it
It is
is.
so degrading.
Yeah,
Completely
yeah.
so. Completely. And the Raise the Wage Act, can you explain a little bit about that? And I know Biden has included it in his $2 trillion COVID relief package.
Yes. So the $2 trillion COVID relief package includes this bill, the Raise the Wage Act, which is historic because it not only would raise the overall minimum wage to 15, but it would gradually phase out this ridiculous sub minimum wage from $2 to the full minimum wage. And this is not a radical idea. There are 7 states that already do this: California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Minnesota, Montana, and Alaska all require the full minimum wage with tips on top, not instead of the wage. And in those states, we see higher small business growth, higher job growth in the industry, higher growth of chains, higher rates of tipping, and one half the rate of sexual harassment in the industry. Why? Because when you pay a woman a full minimum wage, she doesn't feel like she has to put up with everything from customers to get tips to feed her family. She actually can count on a wage from her boss. So we know it can work. We know that the economy doesn't collapse when you pay workers a full minimum wage. And on the contrary, what you see is that these workers spend everything in the economy and it fuels the economy. And that is precisely what we need right now. We need not just immediate relief, we need recovery. The only way small business or any business is going to survive over the long haul is if people like the workforce I represent, which happens to be the largest workforce in America, can actually afford to consume. If they can't afford to consume, our economy cannot recover.
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple times what a massive industry this is, and I believe half of all adults in the country have at one time worked as tipped workers. So there should be a tremendous amount of empathy out there for these folks. I know Maya and I both have worked as tipped workers before and experienced pretty much everything that you have described, just awful soup that you have to swim in if you are doing those jobs. So, beyond the National Restaurant Association, you've said that it's worked in these other states. So, where is that opposition coming from? Are there business owners who don't understand it? Is it primarily Policymakers, what's holding up change? Because it's been like this, as you said, for a long damn time.
It's incredible. I think Florida really demonstrates that this is such a universally popular issue. 64% of Floridians voted to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and even the tip minimum wage to above $13 an hour. When you ask most people in America, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, should people get a $15 minimum wage and should servers get a full minimum wage, they will say, I thought servers already did get a full minimum wage. Most people don't even know, who haven't worked in the industry, that there is a sub minimum. So it's universally popular among Republicans and Democrats alike. That's not the issue. The Restaurant Association has wielded enormous power over, frankly, elected officials from both parties. And they have kind of instilled this incredible fear among small businesses that the sky will fall and the economy will collapse and they just won't be able to sustain themselves if they pay a full minimum wage. But when you talk to small businesses in those 7 states, or if you talk to small businesses, we've got 800 small businesses in our association that are in sub-minimum wage states, but actually pay a full minimum wage with tips on top. And what they've seen is far less employee turnover, far greater employee loyalty, much better service over the long haul, better dining experiences for their customers, just an overall better workforce that's more stable. When you pay everybody a full minimum wage, actually the law allows tips to be shared with all workers in the restaurant, not management, but the back of the house. It creates a more united team between the kitchen and the dining floor. There's so many advantages to paying people an actual wage rather than subjecting them to the biases and harassment of customers, which, before the pandemic, I remember people, poo-pooing the evidence that in fact tipping in our country doesn't reflect the quality of service. It reflects, unfortunately, the biases of customers. So white men make more in tips than women of color. Men in general make more in tips than women, and women's tips are a reflection of customers' judgment of her appearance, her body, her eyes, her hair, everything. And many people denied that. During the pandemic, that idea has been obliterated. Because if women have to remove their masks for their looks to be judged so that they can get tips, I'm sorry, there's no more idea that somehow tips are based on the quality of her service. And we've got to end a situation in which she's so vulnerable and so dependent on those tips that she feels she must expose herself to the virus and her family to the virus for a chance to earn a tip.
Yeah, and it really is. It becomes also a safety issue, right? So could you talk about a bit of like the mental health dangers and involved in addition to the physical health dangers involved with having to be present around so many different people without proper protective gear that's not being provided by the restaurants in many cases. Can you talk a little bit about that?
90% of workers we surveyed several thousand workers who had gone back to work, said that their employers were not following safety protocols. 60% said that they just couldn't enforce these rules on customers because they thought they would lose their tips if they did. The University of California at San Francisco, which is one of the top medical schools in the country, just issued a study indicating that the absolute most dangerous place to work in the United States right now is restaurants. And that came as no surprise to us because of the workers we surveyed, nearly half of them said at least one person in the restaurant got COVID, and a third said somebody had died. These workers are terrified for their health and their lives and their family, but have no choice because so many of them were denied unemployment insurance. They felt compelled to go back before they felt safe. And imagine, these workers are telling us every shift I come into contact with at least 30 people who refuse to wear masks and who refuse to socially distance. That is, look, that's not, even if you don't care about these workers, you don't care about waitresses, you don't care about servers, if we know that the number one place, according to the CDC, to get the virus is in restaurants, the only way we as a public are going to be able to manage the virus until everybody has the vaccine is relying on these workers to be able to enforce these rules. And they're saying we cannot enforce these rules because you're telling us we have to get tips. from these same customers to make up our wages. It's an impossible situation for a massively large workforce that has become essential because everybody's in a rush to open restaurants. Well, if we're going to open restaurants, we rely on these workers. They are essential to maintain the public health, and they can't do it as long as they're relying on tips from the very same customers on whom we expect to enforce these rules.
So I hope now is a moment when there is a chance for enough of a spotlight to be put on this issue, that there's going to be some real movement. What do you see happening legislatively, politically? What is the will to actually do something about this? And is this an issue that there's a chance of finding some bipartisan support on?
Well, we would love to work with your audience, anybody who's listening, to express to every member of Congress that this is a universally popular bipartisan issue. As we saw in Florida, as we saw in Missouri in 2016 and Nebraska, I mean, people across the country believe that anybody who works, regardless of their party, people believe that if you work, you should be able to feed your children. If you work, you should be able to take care of yourself. If you work, you shouldn't have to take off your mask to earn your income. If you work, you should be safe. Most people believe in the basic dignity of work. And so we need everybody to communicate that. And if we do, I think there's tremendous hope. We have a real chance right now of raising the minimum wage to a place that's somewhat livable for people. 15 is not yet livable in a lot of cities, but it's a start. It's so much better than $7, and get rid of a $2 wage that never was livable. You know, I've been really emotional the last couple of weeks because there's, like you said, now this chance to end this horrific legacy of slavery that's been a source of suffering for tens of millions of women and men over generations, 150 years. We're releasing a report on Friday around the history of this issue and telling the story of a server named Hattie in the 60s who worked in the South at a restaurant in the South. And there was a notoriously abusive customer, a white customer, who would often come in and berate the servers. Well, one day she brought him his drink too slowly and he beat her so severely with his cane that she died. And that story sounds so outrageous, like, oh, that's something that happened in the South in the 60s. But frankly, every time a woman is asked on every shift to take off her mask to get her tip, it is a reiteration of what Hattie experienced, which is the power of male customers over these women and their ability to tell them, you need to risk your life for my pleasure. You need to expose yourself to death and your family for my pleasure. I have power over you because I tip you. And that is the dynamic that needs to end, could end, if we could all express to Congress that this is not a Democratic or Republican issue. This is not just Biden's thing. For God's sakes, people voted in Florida for this issue at 12 percentage points higher than they voted for Trump. People believe in a $15 minimum wage across the country. That's what all legislators need to hear right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think people really truly do need to hear it. It's something that we can kind of not think about, especially if we're not actively eating out or actively ordering out. And so really hearing that it's so important to be active, and right now is the time. And when you say 15 isn't enough in some cities, I'm out here in LA and I can tell you, to me, it's sad that we have to fight for even 15
Exactly.
because it hasn't kept pace. Just minimum wage in general hasn't kept up with the economy or productivity in the economy. I think, Lisa, we were talking about that earlier, about the where it should really be at. So
Right.
it's
That's right. And that doesn't hurt just those workers. It hurts all of us. You know, in the restaurant industry, the fine dining sector and the fast food sector have grown a lot. But that middle tier, the Olive Gardens, the IHOPs, the Denny's, those restaurants have somewhat stagnated. And it's because the working people who used to eat in those restaurants, who used to take their families to those restaurants, can no longer afford to do so because the value of the minimum wage has eroded so dramatically. A woman who makes $2.13 at the Olive Garden cannot afford to take her family to the Olive Garden. And look, Henry Ford was no flaming liberal. Henry Ford was the original capitalist in the United States of America. But Henry Ford understood something that the National Restaurant Association doesn't seem to understand, which is that he needed to pay his workers enough that they could actually afford to buy the automobiles coming off the assembly line. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the consumer base he needed to grow the Ford Motor Plant. That's why he was so successful. And today, if we don't pay restaurant workers, guess who ends up suffering as a result? It's the very same restaurants that they work in that don't no longer have them as consumers.
Right.
And it's also small businesses across America, small business restaurants that rely on Main Street. You know, the COVID relief package includes hundreds of billions of dollars of cash relief for small businesses, which is excellent. But a one-time cash grant to a small business isn't going to allow it to survive over the next several years or the long term. What is going to allow a small business to survive is that their community members can actually afford to eat in their restaurant or buy things in their shop. That is what is going to be the long-term recovery for this country. It would be so short-sighted to think that a one-time shot is going to be enough for this economy to survive. So Restaurant Association itself would very much benefit from paying these workers a minimum wage. We all would.
I think we could not agree with you more. This this has to be a part of building back better, and I'm so glad that you are on this issue and obviously passionately behind it. We hope that you have stirred a lot of passions in the people watching here tonight, because we all need to. People need a livable wage. So thank you so much, Sarah, for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you both so much. It's great to be with
Thanks
you.
for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, while she's talking, I just have all of these images of the times that I have worked as a tipped worker, and the number of either dangerous feeling or truly degrading situations that you end up in, because you know that there is an expectation that you are going to perform the way a customer wants you to perform. That is, you are not just bringing food, you are supposed to make them happy. And if what makes them happy is sexually harassing you, then that's something that you're supposed to be okay with, because they're paying you and they're evaluating you while they're eating and deciding whether or not you're going to go home with enough to pay rent or enough to buy food. And it is deeply, deeply degrading at times.
Oh yeah, I remember working in a restaurant, and it was one of those crazy Friday nights, and the table itself was, full of kids. There was food everywhere, and I'd forgotten the father's beer, and he just looked at me and says, "Miss, it doesn't take a rocket scientist." And I remember being so full of rage. I went back and actually went into the freezer and cried. And I remember, I think that was like the first time I ever cried at a job. And because I was so frustrated and so angry, and I knew there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. And of course, they left me a terrible tip, because the minute somebody says something like that, you're like, oh, they're using that now as the excuse to not give me a tip. So I think they ended up leaving like $4 or $5 on like a $120 bill. So it's situations like that. And now the safety issue on top of it with COVID. I mean, for me, every time I leave the house, I spend the next couple of days paranoid that I might have it if I get a little sniffle. So I can't imagine coming face to face with someone on a daily basis and asking them to take off. Like that's crazy to me. And so knowing that they have to deal with that and that they can't really push back, otherwise they're not going to have enough money to maybe pay their rent. Again, I said it earlier, we can do better. We need to do better.
Yeah, we have to. One of the things we didn't talk about was that a lot of these low wage workers are the same folks who live in multi-generational households, because that's how you make the finances work. So to know that in order to support your family, you have to put your family at risk by going out and doing this work where people refuse to even do the bare minimum to try to keep you safe. Like you said, we have to do better. We are now joined with two women. I'm so pleased that they're here to talk with us today. They're both folks who work in the service industry. They have been struggling through the extra layers of challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic has layered on. So pleased that you're both here with us.
Yeah, very much so. Please welcome Allison Martinez Diaz and Lita Gonzalez to We're Speaking. Allison is from West Virginia and Lita live in Detroit. Both are service sector workers. So I want to start with you, Allison. You were the front of house manager at the restaurant and hotel where you worked when the pandemic started. How did things change once the pandemic hit?
It changed drastically. We had to pretty much lay off all the staff except maybe 5 or 6 of us. So I no longer was just a front of house manager. I was also working in every department of the whole hotel. But with no in-house dining, it was just takeout food. So trying to get everyone to actually come in for takeout, but not be scared of the pandemic at the same time was rather difficult. And to also my paychecks relying on takeout tips, which not many people really ever tip on takeout orders. That was a huge challenge.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. A lot of people think that you're not supposed to tip on takeout. And it's like, yes, I've been hearing that over and over again. People, like, they don't realize, do they think the food boxes itself?
Right.
It's crazy. When you were working in the restaurant, did you feel like you were taking a risk with your health to go to work? Did you think about quitting? Okay.
I wouldn't say I thought about quitting. No, I was the only one in my household that was still working. My husband got laid off. We live with my grandparents. My grandfather, he had just had surgery. My grandmother, she was unemployed. So I kind of had no choice. I had to stay working. But my youngest son was high risk, and both my grandparents were high risk. So me being exposed on a daily basis and possibly bringing it back home to them, it was like weighing on my shoulders all the time, but I had no choice.
Yeah, that's the feeling I know a lot of people have, is not having a choice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anelita, you worked in a high-end restaurant as a server. Yeah. What was that work like before the pandemic? And then how did it change when COVID-19 hit?
Before the pandemic, it was interesting just because it was a newer restaurant. And there was just so many high demands that they expected of you. I was a hostess, and I was a hostess turned into a server slash busser slash everything. There was so many things expected that I had never done. I never was a server before. I never bartended before. So a lot of the stuff that I personally was doing, and then things that I was noticing that were requested from other workers, it seemed very unfair. It was pretty much like we were worked like dogs. And then on top of that, having to deal with customers who, like was said earlier, they expect you to basically be at their hands and feet. You forget to bring a drink and now you're being talked to a specific way. After COVID, I stopped working at the restaurant, or once COVID began, rather. I stopped working at the restaurant, but I am in contact with a few people still that work there, and they do tell me just how hard it is because of them, for one, risking with having to wear their mask. Like was said earlier about the tips, they're not getting as much tips or not getting tips at all, which is terrible. It's terrible.
It is terrible. You're now working harder, doing more jobs, putting your health at risk, and you're earning less than you were before this happened. We've talked some about tips, but we haven't really touched on the whole shared tips concept and the additional pressure that puts on the serving staff, because you're not just how happy your customer is does not just determine how much you're going to earn, but with a shared tip system, it also has a real impact on what your fellow workers are going to get. Did you feel that pressure within your organization, and what's the additional psychological stress on tipped workers because of that?
The shared tip pool, I just thought was so unfair, because like you are working hard to earn your money. And then on top of that, you're pretty much working hard to earn everyone else's money as well at the end of the day. There had been times I had worked private parties for this restaurant, and it's 4 people to the party that are actually working. You would think that those 4 people would split a $500 tip. No, it's going to this tip pool that is going to be put on your check at the end of the week. And then on top of that, they had like a ladder system. So I was a hostess, even though sometimes I was serving or bartending, and I was only getting my percentage of a tip. Even if I received $100 tip, I would only see $2, $3 out of it, because hostess were considered bottom of this tip pool for whatever reason.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it would be people who didn't work that week or only worked one day, but they still get part of this tip pool, and they may have got $50 on their tip in their tip pool, and I got $4 or $5, and I worked 80 hours that week. It was ridiculous.
It's beyond ridiculous. And
Yeah.
when I hear you say, I'm sorry, did you say 80 hours? Is that what you said a week?
I would work 40 hours, sometimes 80 hours, just from doing doubles nonstop, back-to-back doubles, opening and closing the restaurant, filling gift shifts. When you think it's good money, you're like, but I need to work this double. I have to make this money, obviously, to live. And that's the mindset that I was in, where I was completely overworking myself and not really getting compensated for the work I was putting in.
Yeah, and when you say working nonstop, I wanted to touch on that with you, Allison, as well. Is breaks. If you're working a 12-hour shift, how many breaks are you getting?
That's funny. Breaks aren't really a thing. Like, yes, there's the state or federal guidelines to it, but you really don't. You get a break when you have a moment to run outside and take a breather, call and check on your kids, or whoever you're needing to touch base with. And you're lucky if that breaks about 3 minutes. Unless the restaurant's not busy, then you can stand up and eat your food and hope you can eat it when it's still warm. But there's no 15, 30-minute, mandatory breaks.
Yeah, Allison, our previous guests talked about the lack of ability for some people to qualify for unemployment insurance because they earned too little. And I understand your state, there's a pretty abysmal unemployment system, so you're not eligible for that. You've continued to work. Can you share with us what the amount of your last paycheck was?
Actually, I just deposited in my account today, $6.46.
Please explain that. I don't understand that number. This was a 2-week pay period.
No, this is a week pay period. So my previous job, when I was at the hotel restaurant, I was very fortunate enough that I made above the sub-minimum wage. We had an awesome ownership there, and they appreciated their staff. Now the restaurant that I work at now, they are fully sub-minimum wage, $2.13 an hour, but they claim our credit card tips for tax purposes on our check. But we're supposed to get paid reinforced up to minimum wage if we don't make like an average of minimum wage for the shift, but Uncle Sam has ate that up in taxes. So I could work 4 shifts a week at, say, even 20 hours. I'm lucky if my paycheck's $5. It's just, I can't even count on my paychecks. I truly miss working where I could count on an actual wage and an hourly rate that I knew at least if I didn't have a good day of busy customers coming in, that I would at least have a decent paycheck.
Yeah, you should be able to count on that at the very least. A livable wage, safe working conditions, a break. Like these
Yeah.
are just the bare minimum that we we would like to that we'd like to see. I mean, this is
Well,
just to me, this
in
is
West
it's
Virginia,
infuriating.
our unemployment is so, there's people that still from last March when they originally applied that still have not received their benefits. It's a shame. And then when I chose to stay working, I was making nothing, but I had to stay working. And I had fellows that were under me, like they were had just started working as servers at our bar. They were sitting at home and they were bringing home $900 a week in unemployment to stay home. I was barely making 500 in 2 weeks, and therefore I couldn't get state benefits, no help with food stamps or anything like that. I couldn't get unemployment because I was making too much technically for the unemployment. So it's been a mess.
So,
Well, you go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Maya.
I was going to say you seem to be managing so well, despite the fact. So I applaud you on that, but it's still infuriating. And I know, um, you know, and I believe, Angelita, you are starting your own project.
Yes.
Because it seems like it's the only way to get a fair minimum wage is to do your own thing. Can you talk about your project?
Yeah. So I run like my own catering called La Taco Bay. I started doing it last year, and then really got more into it. Well, 2 years ago I started, really got more into it once the pandemic began, because working, I wasn't making enough. So I pretty much I do catering. So I do work like still in the food service just for myself, but it's just myself. So it's kind of hard, and I do get kind of nervous because I want to be as safe and cautious as possible. Um, so yeah, I'm doing okay with it so far. I hope to grow it into something bigger by next year. So yeah,
Yeah, good for
I
you.
love.
That
thank you.
being entrepreneurial is scary and it's really brave. So
Mhm.
that's wonderful. You're doing that, and Allison, I think you uh, have taken a similar made a similar decision to go out on your own.
Yeah, we actually just got our business license now. Me and my husband are on our own as handy men and women for a home remodel company. But I had no choice. There's not enough money coming in with the restaurant industry anymore, and it's a shame.
Yeah, I think
Women
being
are
able
amazing.
to, yeah. Well, it's the pivot, right? And I love
Yeah.
that
Right.
both of you just decided to pivot. You said, and that's kind of, being able to think on your feet, the same qualities that made your employers or former employers want to leverage your talents for their own benefit. You're using them for your benefit. And I think that's amazing. So
Thanks.
Thank
It
you.
is. We applaud you and wish you both the very best of luck. Stay healthy, keep your
Mhm.
families healthy,
Thank
and
you.
good luck going forward. Thank you for coming in and talking with us.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
so
Yeah,
me.
much for
absolutely.
having me.
Yeah. Thank you.
I swear we're going to spend this entire show saying we have to do better than this. How in this country are we treating our people like this? People who, I hear Republicans in Congress saying, we can't help people out more because they'll just be lazy and sit back and let the checks roll in. And it is so incredibly uh, galling to hear that
It's
kind of
insulting.
stuff from,
Yeah.
I mean, these are wealthy people predominantly in Congress now who are talking about $300 or $600 a month for people being enough money that people are going to decide that they can sit back and eat bonbons instead of working anymore. And it's so out of touch, and it's just, it's cruel.
No, it's insulting, and it's BS, because I'd like to see them stand on their feet 15 hours a day without a break, and not be a filibuster. I'll say that, because that seems to be. But
but they only do that like once every 20 years. So it's, you don't do it and then you have to get back up the next day and do it again. A week, every week. Yeah.
No, I think we all now have enough rage that we're going to have to figure out how to pivot and turn into positivity. So it's that time. It's time to name the winner of this week's Oh For Fuck's Sake award, given each week to the most inane, offensive, and this week dangerous character in politics. Our nominees for this week were Rudy Giuliani, Matt Gaetz, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And for those who didn't win, remember, it's a dishonor just to be nominated.
That's right. And I don't know if I'm proud or what I am to announce this week's winner among the losers, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, you are the winner of our Oh For Fuck's Sake award for cruelly denying that 9/11 and the Sandy Hook and Parkland school shootings happened, for re-traumatizing children who had survived a school shooting, for harassing a fellow member of Congress and generally being deranged, damaged, and delusional, and foolish enough to accuse the Lincoln Project of being behind your insurrection. You even attempted to Twitter dunk on AOC. Not smart.
Just a bad idea.
And seriously, it's always a bad idea. And seriously, you actually believe that feminists are weak and we can't take care of ourselves. Oh, Marge. Well, because of this and so much more, and because you are so much less than we even could have imagined, you are truly a winner among losers. So congrats or something.
Or something is exactly right. All members of Congress, though, are as miserable as tonight's winner, loser. Hard to tell, really. There are a few things you can do to push forward the change that we all need, the change that we are dying for. Literally, please call your congressperson. We need to get them to raise the wage act passed and a serious COVID relief and stimulus package passed quickly. And while you're on the line, have them demand the expulsion of Marjorie Taylor Greene from the House, and then call your senators and demand the same for Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz. You're going to have a lot to ask for on these calls. And if you are eating out or ordering delivery or picking up, please tip. Yes, for pickup too. Even if it's an extra $1 or $2, bump it up to at least 20% if you can. Please do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to take just a moment to, she got an award. God knows when she's going to get another one for anything that she does. Because I can't think of any other than ours. I don't know what award she could possibly deserve. So let's just take a moment to hear from tonight's winner, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Is it going to be the stuff that's rumored, the things that people don't want to talk about, the things that people don't want to think about? I mean, is it going to be true that the child pedophilia in the elites in the Washington, D.C., is that what we're really going to see come out? Is it true? Is the type of corruption we're going to see come out, is it going to be satanic worship that possibly all these people are involved in? I mean, we already saw there was an email came out of the WikiLeaks emails where Cheryl Moles, and she told Hillary Clinton in an email that she was going to sacrifice a chicken to Moloch in her backyard.
I didn't understand almost any of that.
I was like, translation, please. Yes, I was like, oh, you translator, a crazy translator.
What is this woman talking about? All right. Tomorrow, there is another Lincoln Project LPTV show to tune into. So we want to remind you to please not miss the breakdown tomorrow night at 9 p.m., 6 Pacific, with Tara Setmayer and Rick Wilson. Their guests tomorrow are going to be Popular Information's Judd Legume and former Obama speechwriter and author David Litt.
And we'll be back next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on LPTV, on the Lincoln Project's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. In the meantime, you can hashtag us, we're speaking, or call us, leave us a voicemail.
And for your inspiration to stay involved and work like hell to get these lunatics, criminals, and lowlifes out of office, we leave you with The Squalid. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
It had never been done before. A plan so crazy it just might work. Stir a bunch of frat boys and Nazi real estate agents into invading the Capitol, overthrow a democracy, and if it fails, pretend it never happened. But it would take one hell of a team to pull it off. Drawn from the fetid swamps across America, they are the Squalid. Kevin McCarthy, the leader.
And President Trump won this election, so everyone who's listening, do not be quiet. Do not be silent about this.
Mo Brooks, the co-conspirator.
Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass.
Lauren Boebert, logistics.
Well, I'm certainly not indulging in conspiracy theories that said that I was a part of the attack on our nation's capital.
Ted Cruz, the money man.
Each of you look around, the men and women that are gathered here, you are patriots.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, the brains.
Representatives and senators can be kicked out, and it's a crime punishable by death.
Matt Gaetz, the revisionist.
But make no mistake, the left in America has incited far more political violence than the right.
Josh Hawley, the little bitch.
We do need an investigation into irregularities, fraud. We do need election security reforms.
Rick Scott, American Voldemort.
We've got to figure this out. We've got to be able to prevent this from, I don't know if anything will happen with this election, but clearly we can't let this go on for the next election.
Okay. Jim Jordan, the cheerleader.
I don't know how you can ever convince me that President Trump didn't actually win this thing based on all the things you see. 11 million more votes. He won 19 to 20 bellwether counties. He won Ohio by 8, Iowa by 8, Florida by 3. Somehow doesn't come.
And Tommy Tuberville denies any knowledge of having planned this whole thing at the Trump Hotel on January 5th.
You know, our government wasn't set up for one group to have all three of branches of government. It wasn't set up that way. Or three branches, the House, the Senate, and the executive.
They did their damnedest to steal your democracy, and there's not much stopping them from trying again. Oh yeah, except elections. Don't forget what they did. Remember their names, and then vote these seditious shit trumpets out. Donco Films brings you The Squalid.
Oh, God, that's good.